Hello everybody, welcome back to Modern Dentures. In this video we're going to go through designing a metal framework for this patient. It's a little bit of a tricky one because the patient's got awkward teeth. The lower's okay, lower's pretty straightforward, but the upper one, we got some retrocline teeth that are problematic. As you can see, just trying to take this bite block off is difficult because of the angle of the teeth. We had difficulty taking it out of the patient's mouth. We even struggled taking the impressions out because of the angle. This is the preliminary model, so it doesn't really matter if we scratch it. It's got a little bit of wax on there. Again, this doesn't really matter. The reason I'm taking it off is because I'm going to draw on the model, and the pencil marks won't draw if it's got wax all over it. Obviously this hasn't been surveyed yet, but we can, there's a little trick, get a mechanical pencil like this, and you can hold it at a right angle like that. I tend to do it at an angle, but I'm holding it at a right angle so we can see where these undercuts are. Actually, it's not as bad as I thought. This is the worst area here, but we've got a really big undercut here and a big undercut here, and I think this is where it's getting stuck rather than this side, which actually isn't too bad. That's pretty good. But by just doing that, it gives us an idea of where the metal framework is going to go. The metal framework can't go below the undercut, so we need to make sure that we're staying above it. So for this one, you can see the indentation of the patient's denture at the moment is here. It's a really small denture. It doesn't fit very well at all. It's not utilising these teeth for retention or really this one, but we're going to change that with the design of this one, which will be a horseshoe shape. So the palette is going to be something like that. We're going to have a metal framework coming up here, just so we don't confuse the technician of where the chrome's going. I'm just going to sort of lightly scratch those lines off. Again, as I said, this is just a preliminary model, so it's not going to be used for anything else other than this design. I'm going to scratch it off so it's not a solid line. It's okay if some of it's still there, because I want to be able to see on there where those, roughly where the undercuts are. So when I design it, that I'll definitely come in above those undercuts. And I usually start by just drawing in where I want the metal, so then on the inside it just be around the gingiva, just past the gingiva. Around in front of this bit of tooth, because you don't want the denture displacing, so you want to come up these sides a little bit like that. If you go over like I've done here, again you can just lightly scratch it off. Needs to be a little bit closer there. So again, where I've gone wrong, I could just scratch this off a little bit. Doesn't really matter because I'm going to be adding mesh to that bit. So this, what I'm doing to start with, is the plate. The plate part of this is what dictates the insertion angle of, you know, where it goes in, where it's fitting, where it's touching, and is nice and thin around the teeth. So we just need to come down the back of this tooth here and here. Again, the same, just past the gingival margin. This is just the way that I do it. This is the way that I find my chromes to work and function the best, is this type of design. But there are lots of different designs that you can do. A lot of mine, I tend to do them, which I call a hybrid. This design is essentially it's an acrylic denture with a metal internal framework for its strength, but it then also has the clasps and things to retain the denture. Now we've got that, then we just put in the mesh. And obviously this is a guide for the technicians. This isn't absolutely 100% where everything has to go, but it's given them an idea of where everything should go, so they know what you want. So that mesh framework there. Then after that, I decide where the clasps are going to go. So obviously this side, we're going to come around this tooth. However, what I will probably do with this one is bring this clasp around, and this is not a clasping clasp, this is just reciprocal, and then we bring the clasp onto this tooth, which will be the clasping part. Difficult because there's not much to clasp onto on that tooth. I'm worried about this one, clasping on this one. If we terminate it here, that's a real big undercut there. I don't like coming up over the occlusal surface because you always get problems with that, with the denture not fitting properly, rocking, things like that, because there's no, it makes it really rigid, puts a lot of pressure on the teeth, whereas this way it gives a little bit more natural movement of the denture. And I'm not talking about visible movement, I'm talking about just a flexing movement of the clasps. We'll put it on and we'll let the technicians know that they can change it if they want to. So I can either do that, or I can come up and then go back into the undercut down here, which I think will be better because it doesn't really look like there's much of an undercut on this tooth. So let me just remove . And we'll do something like that, which is what I call a double back S-clasp. These work really well on a tooth like this. I wouldn't normally need to put them on something like this because the idea of this is you're just lengthening the size of the clasp. You've got more there to adjust. But really I'm doing this to get it into that undercut. So yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. The other benefit of doing this, if you lose this tooth, this can still be a clasping tooth. You remove the clasp and you can still use that then as some sort of retention. If the patient loses this tooth, we can add that tooth and we still got a clasping arm that can be adjusted. So these sorts of situations where the patient's teeth are not in very good condition, we feel like, you know, they might last another year or two. This one is a bit questionable, which is why I'm trying to circumvent it and go onto this tooth as well. Just means that we can then add that tooth to the denture later on. Whereas if we just clasp to that one, we can add it, but then we got to then move the clasp onto this one. Whereas if we clasp onto this one now, in a way it kind of cradles that tooth as well. It just holds it in position, so it's a bit mobile, but that clasp isn't actually clasping, it's passive, it's just there. It's actually working as a brace to hold that tooth in, and then the stresses are put on this tooth here, keeping the denture in, the retention on that tooth there. This is what I mean about when you're designing, you need to think about the teeth and what you're doing and why you're doing it and which teeth are being clasped, etc. So the overall design, because it's just mesh with thin metal here, we're also going to bring this mesh around here. Because this is a hybrid, this is going to be super strong, and then this line here is where the acrylic will extend to. In fact, we could probably make that a little bit smaller. And the reason, again, why I'm doing this is because these teeth are a bit questionable and may fail, particularly if this one here fails, and you've just got this small metal framework with no acrylic. This denture's probably then not going to stay in this small, so we need to add a palette. And if it's just a metal framework with no mesh there, you can't add the acrylic palette afterwards. This is my idea of creating a denture that's going to last the patient a bit longer than what it would if it was just entirely metal framework with just the little acrylic bits. As I said, this is more an acrylic denture, but it's got an internal metal framework. And the benefits of that, as I say, is longevity. It means that as the patient loses more teeth because of gum disease and things like that, or they're not cleaning their teeth properly or whatever it might be, then we can maintain the denture and keep adding to it, and we can totally close this palate in. We can reline it, we can do all the sorts of things that you would normally be able to do to a acrylic denture, but you've got the added benefit of this is being held in situ with clasps, and at the moment the palate is for the most part exposed. It's got a bit more coverage than you'd have with a normal metal frame denture. Obviously it's a little bit thicker as well because it's the acrylic's got to cover the mesh framework, but it's still a lot smaller than a full mouth acrylic that you would normally have to do if the patient's not having a metal framework. So it's a little bit of both, and you're getting the benefits of both. A little bit of the downside of the acrylic because of the size and thickness of the palate. So on this tooth, again, with this one, we can either bring the clasp around this way and then terminate it there, or we can bring it around the back and terminate it here. And I usually like to do that. The difficulty with that is where if it's terminated, say here, and it's sharp, when the patient takes it out, there's a good chance that's going to catch on the inside of their gum, make it difficult for them. Whereas if it comes backwards and it's there, it's less likely, unless it terminates here, and then when they're putting it in, they can stab themselves if it's a little bit sharp. And again, this is where the double back S clasp can come in really useful, because you can go around the tooth and then you come back again, and it kind of makes the clasp safer, but it's also increasing the length of the clasp and engaging that undercut, which will obviously help keep the denture in. But because you're increasing the length of the clasp, you've got more memory in the metal, so it can flex a little bit more, so it makes it a lot easier to adjust. On this one, I think, looking at where the undercuts are, it's probably better to come around this way, keep it high on the tooth, and then just come back down into that undercut there, like that. Again, always making sure that your technician knows. Actually, I'm going to come around a little bit more with that. Make sure your technician knows if this doesn't work, once they surveyed it, if they can figure out a better way of adding this clasp, for them to do that. Now, because this has come back, it's in line with this one, so when they're taking the denture out or putting the denture in, because the point of this is very close to this, there's no chance of them catching it on their gum. And also I like the end of my clasp quite rounded as well, so I always let my technician know, or if we're designing it on the computer, that these are very rounded, they're not pointed. And for most people, it's not a problem. They find it easy enough. They just take the denture out, even if it's really pointed. They can feel it. They just take it out. They're comfortable. But some patients, they're a bit older. Maybe they've lost some dexterity, and taking the denture out could be quite difficult for them, especially if it's got clasps on, and they might take it out, and then as they're pulling it out, catch themselves. Now on this one, we're going to put clasps on the 3 as well. This one's a little bit tricky because we can't come from this side, so we've got to come around this way. So I'm going to come out from the front of the tooth, go round. And what we can do is we can just look on the model. I put the smile line in, which is there. This is why we put this in, because it helps us when we're designing the metal framework, or the technician's working, we know where the lip line is. So if the lip line is there, that clasp is going to be hidden, so we know this isn't going to show, even if we have a big bar around here. We come right up behind the tooth, and then behind it, so when they smile, the only bit that you're going to see is a little tip of that clasp there. So we're always thinking about the position of the clasps. Where's the best place to put it, where it's not going to be seen. And then on this side, this is a lateral, although it's huge. We've got to put quite small teeth in here to fit this gap again. This is another tricky one. The lateral on this side is going to be tiny in order to get this tooth in the centre line. So we haven't got much room at all. If that's the width of your teeth, there's not much room for that. So we'll have a little look at that when we come to do the trying. Be an interesting one. Now this one, because we're going to put it in the undercut here again, so it's not showing too much. But we can't have a little tiny clasp going into here. We need the arm as long as possible. So we're going to take the arm all the way back up to this part of the denture. Now you might say, well, this clasp is going to be buried by the flange here, which it doesn't have to, because we can just gum fit this. We put this 4 in, or 5, it would be a 5 because of the width of it. When we put that in, remember where the gum is, it's here. You're not going to see this area, so it doesn't matter what it looks like, so we'll just gum fit it. It's not going to help in retention. We don't need to build up the flanges for thickness for the lip or the cheeks or anything like that, so we literally just going to see the front of that tooth and the occlusal surface for its aesthetics. I just thought this tooth here, so that's the patient's bite. I'm just wondering whether we should put a tooth behind there to mirror this side. I don't think we should. The patient's never had a tooth there for a long time. This looks like the hamulus notch there as well, and if we put there, it's just going to be a lot of adjustments. If that is the hamulus notch, I think it is. I didn't check, something like that. Sometimes if I spot it, normally I would be designing these chromes in the mouth, and it's when you suddenly see something like that, you go, oh, and then you just check. I'm doing this in the laboratory because just for time reasons, really, it was just easier for me for this one, because I was doing the filming of the bite blocks. It was easier for me just to come in and do this part of it in the laboratory. But if I was doing this in the mouth, I would have gone, in the clinic, I would have seen that and thought, oh, is that the hamulus notch? And then looked in the patient's mouth, get them to open wide, and then you'll be able to see it distended and pulled taut on that area, which means you wouldn't be able to cover it. And if you can't, you know, that's the extent of your denture anyway. So putting a tooth there, we would then have to cut all the metal off and remove all the plastic, because it's digging in a lot on that back area. So that's the basic design of that upper framework. Now what I like to do is I just colour in a hard line, like a slightly thicker line, which is like the bounding border of the metal framework. Because generally, when we design these on the computer, this is a strengthening bar. It's not thin mesh like that. So we put the mesh down, and then we put a thicker bar all the way round, which is for strength. And you know, that's the whole point of having this mesh, is for strength. But if this is just thin mesh here, and you've got a thicker section to it, then the mesh can bend, and it's not really going to add much support and strength to the denture. So it's almost like a lingual bar, but not anywhere near as thick as that. It's smaller, you know, it's only a couple of mil, and it's just to give it a little bit of added strength. Then this is the acrylic palette where it's extended to here. So again, the acrylic sort of like doubling up the size of the denture, but this acrylic will be very thin, and it's really just designed to then go into the post down and blend in seamlessly, so it doesn't feel like a big lump in the patient's mouth. So it's a couple of mil thick the most, where the metal framework is tapering to almost a sharp edge. It's not a sharp edge because obviously you've got the post down that you cut in, which is going to give it a little bit of thickness as well. Okay, so I think that's pretty much done. That's my design. Okay, so for this lower one, it's going to be a pretty straightforward setup. I do them slightly differently sometimes. Quite often the metal framework will run all the way around, and then you'll just have the mesh for the teeth to go in. However, I prefer them to just have mesh rather than that major connector going all the way around. And the reason for that is because this lingual aspect of the metal framework quite often needs adjustment. You've got some sensitive tissue down there, and if a metal framework is impinging on it, because the metal frame is so thin, it's very, very difficult to adjust it. Lingually here, this is obviously going to be metal, but we keep it nice and high, right up here, so it minimises the chance of us needing to do any adjustments in that area, and then it's just sitting on the teeth, on that level surface of the teeth. And then again, as you would do here, you would have this free end saddle would just be mesh. You know, you wouldn't have your piece of metal running around there ever. It's done like this, and then it's acrylic, and then we'd have a tissue stop there. But then traditionally the metal would carry on, and then you just have the mesh. However, I don't want the metal carrying on, I want it terminating here, here, and as I said previously, I don't have rest seats on my teeth. This metal framework will sit above the undercut, so it will actually sit on the teeth. It's metal, it's not going to go anywhere. And so from your contact point from there, actually I do like to come around the back of these teeth, like that. And this is important, this is your reciprocation. So from this point to this point, it's reciprocating around the whole of the tooth. You know, from this point to this point. So the majority of it acts as it being telescopic. If you just terminated it here, okay, there's no reciprocation. So it's not going to sit on the tooth, it's just going to push, and it's going to push the tooth out that way. So this is part of the framework, and then we bring the clasp up and then down and into the undercut. Again, this one, just to increase the length of it, there's a nice undercut down there. So I think we'll just have a little bit of a double back again. It's difficult sometimes drawing on the tooth because of all the little bumps and angles, etc. As I say, sometimes you just have to scratch bits off. Let's put a bit back on. Okay, that's pretty straightforward there. So then here we will have a clasp. I'm not sure where the undercut is, so I'm going to do more of a roach style clasp, coming down, leaving space for at least one tooth there, because it makes it easier to set the teeth. It's not right in the middle of the tooth, but where I've put it, it's probably going to be right in the middle where the 5 is. The 6 is going to be here, so I'm actually going to extend this back a little bit to there, and to make it clear, to scratch this bit off again. It attaches there, so now we just need a clasp on this one. Again, this is going to be roach type. What's really important with this one is that it's in front of the tooth, because we don't want the displacement of the denture. If we tuck it in here, which will keep it nice and hidden, it's not stopping the denture from displacing this way, so we'll get some rotation. Whereas if it's on the front of the tooth there, reciprocated by the back metal here, which is coming all the way around to this bit here, look. So it's really going to hold everything in place. The clasp isn't just to hold the denture down, it's to hold it in place as well, stop those rotational forces. You do have to be a little bit careful there, because I think we might have a freedom just there. But I think where we put it is close enough. And again, so we've got enough room there to have one tooth, and then your 6 and your 7. With this one, we've done it pretty much 2 teeth, and then your 6 behind. And that's a nice longer clasp, but this is still not as long because it's going to the front of the tooth. And that's it. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sure it was loads of fun. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that reminder bell so that you get to see future videos that I'm making, especially for this one, which is going to be a really interesting case from start to finish, doing the metal framework. We'll be setting up the teeth once that framework comes back, and we'll be doing a video of that as well. We'll be trying it in, we'll be processing it, and then we'll be fitting it in the patient's mouth as well. Okay guys, thanks for that. See you in the next one.